Well, hello. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're doing the Psyche of the Feminine Part 2, Love, Sacrifice, and Individuation. And once again, we've got presenter and author Imelda Gaudissart. Speaking today will be Imelda Gaudissart. She authored Love and Sacrifice, the biography of Emma Jung. I will be in the background as the AJC host and technician for question time. Today is a webinar. We're going 90 minutes, but of course we could go a little longer if questions persist. You're able to ask questions from any computer using the question feature, or you can email them to us at ashleyjung@gmail.com. Also look out for chat messages from us. Make sure you've clicked on the correct audio choice in the upper left corner. Either do mic and speaker or telephone. Most people use mic and speaker, but if you have audio troubles, go ahead and try the telephone. Explore the features. There's a full screen mode. You can enlarge the presenter video or the slides and pictures. So please send us an email if you have trouble with that. Our next event will be the Life and Ideas of James Hillman on May 2nd. Author Dick Russell will be presenting live from the C.G. Jung Institute of San Francisco. They really put together some great webinars out there, so we're excited to be going back to San Francisco again. Recording warning, we are taping today, so if you'd like to remain anonymous with your question, please let us know. Well, let me introduce Imelda Gaudissart, a Jungian analyst for more than 30 years, co-author with her husband Pierre of a new translation of the I Ching, and currently resides in Tours, France. So, without anything further, I'm going to go ahead and let Imelda take us away.
Okay, I am online. I'm very happy to meet you again for the second time. And I'm sorry I don't see you, but I'm very glad to have a chance to share some more of my encounter with Emma Jung. And the subject of this webinar, as announced, is Eros, Sacrifice, Individuation. This topic has been inspired by the inner evolution of Emma Jung during most of her 53 years of marriage. But before entering in the core of this topic, I think it is important to remind my invisible audience of the circumstances that led me to the writing of the book. While undertaking the research, I discovered that very little of Emma's correspondence had been saved. She deliberately destroyed most of her mail. The lectures she delivered to the club or the institute are still to be open to the public. Even the family at first refused my intention to write about Emma. Very clearly, I can state that Emma commissioned that book. Synchronistic events led me to recognize the necessity to speak about Carl Gustav Jung's wife. Two important dreams that she sent me finally helped me make up my mind. I had to accept the idea that she had something to tell us. To make sense, to return to those dreams, I'm going to tell them again. In the first one, Emma symbolically was searching from the depth of a round well under the shape of a beautiful gold and silver fish. We know that fish carry an image of renewal. For Jung, they represent the driving force of the coming world of consciousness. For me, after reflection, this symbolic image expressed the triumph of Emma's accomplishment and her desire to be recognized. In the second dream, she was emerging from the underground under the shape of a splendid goose, which is an image of fidelity to the call and of totality. I felt that she was coming out of the underworld to be seen. In a subtle way, Emma expressed that she had accomplished her own inner journey and wanted to share it. Being the person she was, I became convinced that she did not do it for only her own sake. Having been a pioneer in her own right, I felt that she was carrying a message meaningful for us today. Women, the world over, are fighting for respect and equality. They are bearing most of the burden of bringing up the next generations. More often than not, they are performing this task without little recognition from society. And to me, Emma succeeded to meet that challenge in an exceptional way. We'll be looking at how she did it. To make sense, I think it's important to return briefly to the beginning of Emma's life. Her values were based on her education. Her parents were religious people and belonged to the new industrial society. They were quite wealthy, but also concerned with the well-being of the people working for the factory. In addition of that, Emma's experience of having to care for her ailing father during her adolescent years had taught her humility and devotion. Possessed by a natural and strong intellectual potential, Emma took advantage of all possible forms of learning. We have good reason to think that Emma discovered the quest of the Grail during the year she spent in Paris as an adolescent. It proves that she possessed already then an intuitive interest for a form of inner symbolic exploration. We have here two pictures, which I think will express or are expressing in a very nice way the beginning and the end of Emma and Carl Gustav Jung's life. On the first picture, the young couple is at their wedding year, 1903, and at the end, at the last picture, we will see Emma in a flower garden 2 years before her death. On this first picture, which dates 1903, the year of Carl and Emma's wedding, you will note, as I did, how Emma, as a young wife, short of being 21, seems reserved, not to say shy. One may even ponder how Emma really feels. I sense in her smile a mixture of joy, but also an inner feeling of uneasiness. By comparison, Carl seems triumphant. He's proudly dressed up. To me, he looks like the Siegfried that he meets and describes in the Red Book. And of Siegfried he said, "He had everything in himself that I treasured as the greater and more beautiful. He was my power, my boldness, my pride." Carl could claim that he had fulfilled his prediction made as a young medical student that Emma Rauschenbach would become his wife. This young Emma at that time was a mere 16-year-old, hardly a young woman. Then the second picture dates from 1953. Emma Jung is already ill. She has been suffering from the back and she's 2 years away from her death. We know that Emma didn't like to be taken on picture. Here, she doesn't even look at the camera. She's slightly bent, showing a real physical fragility. 50 years separates those two pictures, a lifetime made of crises, accomplishments, delusions, and joys, which have been the share of Emma Jung. It is important to recall that Emma Jung died of a cancer at the age of 73 in 1955. She was 7 younger than her husband Carl. He survived her by 6 years, dying at the age of 86 in 1961. During their 53 years of common life, Carl and Gustav Jung certainly gave Emma a chance to be exposed to his wake, to the revolutionary concept and novel methods of approaching psychic life. Thanks to a stimulating dialogue, Emma could fulfill her need for intellectual nourishment. It helped her to consolidate a solid foundation. Emma would have to rely on that foundation as her husband decided to yield to his attraction for women and let Emma take care of its consequences. Emma's generous attitude toward her husband was certainly coupled with disapproval and anxiety. Whatever her feeling, she had no power to talk Carl away from his natural inclination toward women. Few women in our contemporary world would, the way Emma Jung did, remain faithful for 53 years to a man, the stature of a giant with its huge shadow side. Of course, Emma questioned her situation. Perhaps she was willing to suffer major discomfort, convinced that the loss of her husband would be a greater evil. My conviction is that both Emma and Carl, in a very mysterious way, were intended to live together. One can speak of a special calling. As a young wife of 28, Emma was already facing some dramatic strategic problems. She expressed them to Freud in a letter written in 1910. She confided to him after some 3 years of inner debate. The letter is related to Sabina Spielrein crisis, which shook the couple in 1907. But the letter also makes some comments on Carl's general attitude toward his wife. This is what Emma wrote to Freud. Usually, I'm quite at one with my fate, and I see very well how lucky I am. But from time to time, I'm tormented by the conflict about how I can hold my own against Carl. I have no friends. All the people who are associated with us really only want to see Carl. Naturally, the women are all in love with him. With the men, I'm instantly cordoned off as the wife of the father of friend. Carl also says that I should stop concentrating on him and the children. But what on earth am I to do? End of letter. It is such a loud cry of despair and self-doubt. It raises questions about the sheer unfairness and selfishness of Carl toward his wife. Carl doesn't even seem to realize that Emma has recently given birth to their 4th child and that they moved from Zurich to Küsnacht, which was a major undertaking. Jung simply fell short of accepting to confront his inner feminine world and the anima figure. He openly refused to resist his powerful sexual urge that pushed him beyond accepted marital behavior. The blind figure of Salome which appeared in his dream during his young years of adulthood, was speaking of this shadow reality. In a symbolic way, Jung chose to ignore Odysseus' advice to resist Circe, the temptress. The legend tells us that Circe, as Odysseus was sailing home, would attempt to seduce him with her love songs. There would be a strong appeal to satisfy his sexual aspiration and keep him away from his decision. We remember that Odysseus, to resist this overwhelming temptation, asked his sailors to tie him to the mast of the boat. He even added that under no circumstances should they untie him. He was aware that the attraction would be overpowering. His goal was to return to Ithaca, where Penelope, his faithful wife, was hopefully waiting for him. So Jung didn't seem to have the same energy and intention that Odysseus at that time had. Then, when Tony Wolff, under the pressure of Carl, entered in the couple's life, Emma could not expect any assistance from the outside. Even her mother pushed her to face her complex destiny. Emma's identity was being put into question, and she was faced with the need to find a way out. Soon enough, those circumstances triggered the obligation for her to dive in her inner self. Emma's anger toward Carl's lack of consideration was legitimate, but she realizes that relying on the collective value and the social reference which had been hers so far would not be of any help. She slowly became aware that the true challenge had to come from her own quest. Instead of developing deadening neurosis, she explored mythological and religious symbolic text. She felt they might help her find a deeper and more suitable answer. That leads us to the lecture Emma Jung gave to the member of the Young Psychology Club of Zurich in 1916 as its first president. Emma had accepted to hold this function in order to put an end to many woman-negative animus bickering. It is important to remember that Emma Jung was then 34 years old, the mother of 5 children, and in charge of a busy household. And in 1916, Tony Wolff had been the muse and mistress of Carl for more than 3 years. The lecture title is Schuld. In German, the word is associated with the notion of guilt, failure, shame, and responsibility toward oneself. In the lecture, Emma did not openly express that her reflections were related to her inner questioning. But reading the text today suggests that a direct connection might have existed between Emma's own situation in 1916 and her active exploration of mythological references. Several sources are all pointing to the same central question, which were at the core of Emma's suffering. And this suffering can be spelled out that way. Why must one experience failure when no harm has been done personally? Another question on Emma's mind could have been, why is there seemingly no way to mend the texture of one's existence damaged by unsolicited interferences from the outside? For the sake of our coming development, it is meaningful to mention three of these archetypal sources commented upon by Emma in Schuld. Emma first refers to the lost paradise. God had given Adam and Eve the right to freely roam as they wished. Therefore, Adam and Eve are not making a deliberate choice. They are simply following a legitimate curiosity inherent to their nature. You certainly remember that they were ousted from the carefree life in the Garden of Eden. They seemingly overpassed some of the right granted by God. The banishment from paradise is described as a just retribution. One might argue that the offense was questionable. The need for knowledge had been engraved in human nature by the Creator himself. Then Emma considered another archetype and mythology with Prometheus and his story. Prometheus feels for humans. He resents as arbitrary the limitation imposed on their development and well-being by Zeus. So he decided to break the law of the Supreme. He presents humanity with fire. Symbolically, fire represents the access to consciousness. So far, had been reserved to the gods. We all remember that Prometheus paid an exorbitant price for his generous action in favor of humanity. Every night, Zeus' eagle is eating up Prometheus' liver, a deadly attempt to his very life. One conclusion is that parting from the submission to the powerful God carries the risk of a major punishment. The third reference comes from the Grail legend. Govan, the naive and well-meaning knight, is ambling in a group of people who are expecting him to heal the deadly wounds of Fisher King. Alas, he has no inkling as how to achieve that mission. He feels unable to meet the court's expectations. This episode will send him to an endless search for identity. It is clear that Emma's illustrations are none others than a questioning addressed to her own inner crisis. She feels that Carl's behavior has broken the harmony she had legitimately dreamed and achieved in the first years of her wedding. Meanwhile, she is quite conscious of the exceptional nature of her husband's scientific achievements. However, she deeply resents the unfair competition she had met as choice partner in Carl's intimate life. She is simply at a complete loss as how to break the evil spell that has been cast on her own life project. What must she do to recover some inner peace and stability? Those few clues are certainly shedding some light on how Emma's secret feeling might have been at that time. Let us look at what might have been the general psychological underpinnings of her situation. The unconscious is ambivalent. It is both regressive and progressive. Differentiating oneself from the collective unconscious may provoke some terrible inner tension. Still, the attachment to the archaic unconscious power is pulling one backward. The regressive energy of the archaic unconscious tends to maintain the status of sameness. It goes against the natural evolution expressed by the progressive part of one's unconscious. As the self struggles to liberate oneself from utter submission or potential destruction, those two opposite forces confront each other. In daily life, we experience this extreme inner fighting with our complexes. It comes to light when one has to let go of one negative relationship which deeply impedes the evolution. The inner conflict creates some frightful feeling of being thrown away in the unknown. Transgression becomes the natural step toward transformation, but often feeling of guilt prevents the necessary break to be made. It can also come from the attachment to a religious devotion or the positive image one wants to carry of being a savior against all odds. In the Chinese tradition, the call for evolution comes from one's Tao. In the Jungian concept, it surges from the personal self. Nonetheless, freeing oneself from any dependence, it is most of the time an excruciating task. Behind the collective references presented by Emma in her lecture, her personal reality was hardly hidden. If she wanted to survive meaningfully, she had to sacrifice a certain expectation of love and life. She had to distance herself from many traditional and religious values of her time and social upbringing. She had to reassess her own convictions and connect with her own self. She had to develop her own vision. There was a high price to pay to part from this attachment to traditional values. She reached the conclusion that there would be no other way if she wanted to survive her conflicting, even destructive feelings. Her dialogue with these archetypal images helped her define what should be her unique vocation or destiny. As in A Quest of the Grail or in fairy tale, the trials were forced upon Emma Jung. They were calling for a confrontation and transformation of the unconscious part of her personality. It was such a lonely experience, with no one around to supply help and understanding, at least openly. One can easily identify with Emma Jung's painful solitary experience. We can draw a parallel with our human conditions of today. We know that this already remains a fearful and solitary journey. What can even evoke the desperate call of Christ on the cross as he addressed a frightful scream to his Father, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, Father, why did you abandon me? Today, we can rely on on-site help, but the path is still one that we have to walk alone. The remarkable dimension of Emma Jung is that she did not refuse the challenge. The specific karma of Emma Jung exemplifies the crucial issue that each one of us is facing when our peace of mind is broken by a trauma or when there is an inner pressure to evolve coming from the self. Any crucial emerging situation is forcing us to figure out how to reach a level of selfless love based on one's conformity to the self. One cannot evade the need for a debate with the unconscious when entering the road of what Jung would later name the individuation process. In this process, like Emma, we have to overcome delusion, narcissist expectations, paranoid fears, regressive temptation, violence, and so on. The Schuld lecture, in a subtle manner, is an echo to this complex task. It is the example of Emma's dramatic inner evolution which inspired the title of the book and this webinar topic, Love, Sacrifice, and Individuation. Jung said that each one has to develop his own myth. So, in a way, what I offer in this presentation is a personal proposal to look at our individuation process. It is a personal vision born from my encounter with Emma Jung. It can outline what will be our lifetime process as each and everyone eventually has to face it. Therefore, in a very modest way, I invite you to follow me in the subsequent development. As I visualize love, sacrifice, and individuation, I feel that they can be looked at as the three symbolic pillars which are sustaining and guiding our quest to reach conformity to our inner core, the self. Ultimately, after trials and error, this complex journey leads us, according to Jung, to the Jung concept, to the conjunction of the opposite. Its final goal is nothing less than approaching wholeness. Therefore, I propose that we first look at the number 3, which in itself is an archetype. It's not by accident that I choose to develop it. Among its many symbols, I make the choice to single out some of them relevant to our purpose. 3 can be considered as the third term. As such, 3 is the movement which gives meaning to the creativity of the unconscious. 3 is also Hermes, the messenger of change. Hopefully, we remember that the seat of Themis, the oracle in Delphi, is a 3-legged seat. It is the seat of transformation. It is the door to the unknown and ultimately to oneself. In that regard, I like to let myself be moved by the form of triangles. And I looked at these triangles in a non-rational way. I feel free to offer them as a nourishment to our reflection. I'm sensitive to the symbolic power of this simple archetypal geometric figure. Let's look at those 2 specific triangles. 3 as the upward triangle can be understood, among other meanings, as a symbol of the masculine, of yang, of creativity, logos, spirit, phallus. The downward triangle can be looked at as a symbol of the feminine, of yin, the giver, intuition, emotion, receptivity, the symbolic womb. In my vision, the combination of the two triangles gives a diamond, a special quaternary, a precious stone, an image of the conjunction of the opposites, a totality. In the religious symbol of the Romanesque period, it could be looked at as the mandorle, the almond-shaped carving that evokes a secret egg. So this is for the triangles images. 3, in a subtle way, expresses the different stages of confrontation. This confrontation can take two different forms. Like in the two triangles, it can be either in an active form or in a receptive attitude. In the I Ching, both yin and yang participate to the process of becoming and are complementary. Yang is action, yin is reactivity. Both are like the two faces of the same coin. Then, in the fairy tales, 3 represents the successive trials leading to the positive outcome. Then finally, we can say that 3 morphs to 4, to the mandala figure of the square in the circle. Approached from a symbolic standpoint, we can state that life is a constant dance between 3 and 4. We move from a creative and unstable process towards stability and a temporary totality or wholeness. 3, as presented here, will escort us as we approach the 3 archetypes of love or eros, sacrifice, and individuation. Together, we start on a journey. This journey attests that the unconscious psyche is the activator. It expresses the powerful demand of the self. It includes the ego as the light of the consciousness. This journey leads us to forgotten or unknown lands through trials, but also toward our inner temple. So now let's first approach Eros. Eros in the Greek pantheon, yes, a beautiful image, is considered as the first god. He is the one who stimulates life. He is also the god of relatedness. He can be possessive, sometimes destructive. By nature, he attracts and throws one in a non-predictable experience. One can hardly resist his call. Eros gets his way through emotion, is inhabited by a numinous power. Eros is like an arrow that symbolically and forcefully links two sides that would otherwise be separate. King Solomon, in the Song of Songs, hails love as a spiritual as well as sensual experience. It is united body and soul. It can be understood as a sacred eros gamos between the human and the divine. In another approach of eros, the mystics express the total shattering and powerful feeling as they are suddenly put face to face with a total other. It is a mysterious emergence from the unconscious. It is the experience of the absolute love that transfixes the whole being. It can psychically and physically shake the person who is exposed to this extreme revelation and illumination. Another expression of Eros is given in the episode of L'amour courtois from the medieval period. It is the search to express and glorify a triangular love. The quest is projected on a third person. Emma Jung, no doubt, explored the mysterious quest of the minstrels in search of a fulfillment of spirit, body, and soul within the respect of those involved. Esther Harding, in her book Woman's Mystery, which dates from 1950, writes, Eros takes one away from mundane formula made of good behavior. Eros' quest is radical in its aim. It can be regarded as a spiritual and psychological feminine principle. To be related to the principle of Eros means to be oriented to a purpose which transcends personal aims and ambitions. End of quote. And according to Jung, the beginning of all things is love. It is important to add that Eros is also rooted in some functions that we share with the animal world. They are the functions connected with the inborn instinct for reproduction and survival. But Eros also provides a dynamic impulsion. It pushes the mind upward in its quest to satisfy a natural spiritual quest which transcends the physical experience. We all remember how Jung, in his memoir, did reflect on the realm of love or Eros. He wrote, in my medical experience as well as in my own life, I have again and again been faced with the mystery of love, and I have never been able to explain what it is. End of quote. In our daily circumstances, Eros expresses our passions, our cravings, and our aspiration for closeness and for fusion, but it can also be devouring. We discovered that Eros is born to evolve from its inborn call to a more subtle and spiritual relatedness and a genuine engagement to others. The pressure emanates from the unconscious. It is a slow transformation from narcissist satisfaction toward an open relationship which is not a threat to one's own integrity. One can even state that self-respect is a positive form of love. If well developed, it opens naturally to the love of others. It should hopefully reach a symbolic union of body, spirit, and soul in a conscious relationship with oneself and with the other. Sexual love, agape, and caritas can be addressed as the three steps we are invited to climb. From instinctive energy to spiritual awakening, many transformations are taking place. It is a vision that belongs to the sacred realm. The Buddhists would call that stage awakening. Of course, Eros has many ways of expressing its power, its dynamism, as well as its pathological trend. Emma Jung's relationship with her own Eros was linked to her psychological function, sensation introvert. The intimacy The immediacy of the experience had to be relayed by her first auxiliary function, thinking. In order to reach an inner harmony, Emma developed her feeling function. We are now aware that the inborn eros needs to be transformed through many trials. Symbolically, we can say that the raw has to be transmuted into the cooked. Cooking takes place either through water or through fire. From the anthropologist Levi-Strauss, it allows the passage from the stage of nature to that of culture. It opens to a more lasting existence. This process changes the substance and brings in a new reality. This process can be named sacrifice. So naturally, after we've been looking at Eros, we now approach the second term of our trilogy, sacrifice. Sacrifice comes from the Latin and means to make sacred. It is the basis of every religion. Each and every religion expresses its meaning and legitimacy through the ritual of sacrifice. The function of the sacrifice is precisely to introduce to the sacred realm and prove its meaning. The word religion originates from the Latin religare, and the religious sacrifice has for purpose to create a link to God, to the divinity. Its aim is to obtain blessing and protection from the divine. Therefore, sacrifice is the price that has to be prepaid. Archaic religions, as we know, involve human sacrifice. The more precious were the object to be sacrificed, the more powerful would be the spiritual energy received in return. With Abraham, the sacrifice takes a more symbolic turn. The animal is dramatically substituted for man. The Catholic ritual of Mass is a symbolic celebration of Christ's sacrifice to save us from our sin. We are liable to repeat symbolically Christ's sacrifice to reach our own redeemed self. We meet our symbolic cross when drastic choices have to be made. They imply physical and psychological transformation. They can truly be sacrificial. Sacrifice also implies purification and elevation. In Christianity, the baptism as the second birth by immersion in water makes one move symbolically from the horizontal reality to the upright, more spiritual dimension of life. Confession can be considered as another redeeming act. It is one role of the therapy. It is interesting to note that in the I Ching, sacrifice refers to hexagram 49, revolution, and to hexagram 50, the sacrificial vessel. But sacrifice is not exclusively restricted to religious fare. The sacrifice is the necessary condition for all changes, growth, renewals, and evolution. From the day a human being comes out of the mother's womb to the day he reaches the grave, a multitude of sacrifice will dot his path. Let's have a look at some illustrations of sacrifices. To differentiate oneself from the other, both child and mother have to die to their tendency to achieve total fusion. It might become a lifelong struggle between two opposite forces. It is important to remember that in order to sustain life, the totality of our body cells are renewed every 7 years. Let us also remember what the biblical text says. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a seed, said John in chapter 12, text 24. Pruning a fruit tree by cutting down branches helps to increase its fertility. To enhance the life of a forest, a systematic clearing is necessary. Felling trees allows the renewal and the growth of the forest. In the evolution of life, as one advances in age, physical and sexual energies are waning. It can create a new space for psychic development and subtle love. But to accomplish this task, one has to accept the partial loss of one's physical strength. All these actions are underpinned by a common archetype, the subtle link between life and death through sacrifice. Jung did not hesitate to state that the sacrifice is not mere destruction, but it is the foundation stone for what is to come. End of quote. Our psychic task is to bring to our consciousness as much material from the unconscious as we possibly can. And Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. End of quote. We quickly learn that for each growth and for each change, there is a price to pay. There is no gain without a loss. This is the only way toward any transformation. The loss of life in paradise for Adam and Eve illustrates this drama. Let's repeat that to sustain life, Emma Jung had to sacrifice or abandon her dream of a unique love with her husband. She had to forsake the social and moral value attached to the traditional marriage. Let's say that synchronicity often plays an active role in those unavoidable changes. It underscores the reality of a crossroad, a drastic change of orientation. Dreams and events are occurring simultaneously. A car breakdown, a sudden illness, a depression, an open conflict, even nightmare. Synchronicity is a causal, meaningful coincidence between psychic and somatic events. It helps enhance the power and double nature of our instinctive energy, which emanates from the very core of our being. Jung named this mysterious compound the psychoid. It helps us understand that any change affects both our psychic and physical realities. The sacrifice is the action that allows and seals any evolution from unconsciousness to conscious awareness. Marie-Louise von Franz expressed this crucial and universal reality, and she wrote, "The pressure toward individuation is truly a human instinct. That is why it is often represented by an animal, a horse, or a dragon. Sometimes it has to be sacrificed because the self, the deeper nucleus of a psyche, requires it. Once it is sacrificed, it is being transformed in a mandala, a symbol of a renewed world." End of quote. This quote leads us naturally to our third term, the third archetype, individuation. Individuation expresses a natural process inborn in each individual. Its goal is to accomplish one singular and unique destiny. It is a potential call from the center of every personality. It is a subjective inner process, but it is coupled with the necessary objective task of being in tune with the outside world. Symbolically, the purpose of the individuation process is to reach the conjunction of the opposites. These opposites have a paradoxical relationship with one another. Such is the case for the unconscious and the conscious, of course. These opposites are carrying our irrational qualities versus our rational tendencies. These opposites are made of our shadow part, of our complexes, or specific relationship with the persona, the ego, with the anima or the animus. And Jung added, even vices and virtues have to be regarded as brothers. These opposites are all components of our psychosomatic reality. They have to be brought closer through a succession of confrontation. They need to be acknowledged and integrated. Through the acceptances of this complementarity, one approaches a certain harmony with oneself. At the request of the self, which is our inner organizer, we entice our ego to accept the superior order. The Chinese express this universal reality when they evoke the Tao. Tao is the lifelong task to reach wholeness and harmony between those two opposite energies, yin and yang. They are the two actors and creation of life. Their constant movement is a reflection of the life of the cosmos. The radical evolution from birth through growth, decline, and death are the actions to guarantee continuity and renewal of the cosmic cycles. I like to imagine that the three concepts, principle or archetype, love, sacrifice, and individuation, are carrying a sacred dance together. According to the need, they take turn in leading. They take us through a mysterious and risky movement. They represent the interaction at work within our inner stage. Love, sacrifice, and individuation are the expression of our creative energy put at the service of our sole responsibility to accomplish our unique destiny. In this lifelong process, Emma found for herself the symbolic tools from the panoply of mythological, religious, and artistic representation. It slowly led us toward her symbolic mandala. When Jung is addressing the individuation process, he speaks of her work contra naturam. These processes push one's away from the longing to maintain the original unity. The primeval unity is a circular, repetitive movement deprived of evolution. The Ouroboros expresses this reality of the snake biting its tail in an endless and hopeless union. The individuation process forces one, through sacrifice, to give up the nostalgia of an elusive perfection. Perfection is opposed to life and to wholeness. It is a form of rigidity versus flexibility. Eros, within the individuation process, is pushing one to explore and discover new frontiers. It will reach its goal if one is ready to accept the risk of this life and death adventure. The individuation process is a natural call to incarnate the transcendent into our daily life. Emma's situation is still quite relevant for us today. Troubled and bitter relationships are the seeds for deep questioning, not to mention all the social intrigues or spontaneous fear toward the other, or collective negative projection, and so on. To emerge from our deadly complexes and to be born anew, one has to return to the symbolic womb of the prima materia. It is synonym of chaos, fear, and depression. Still, there lies the source of renewed energy. Once again, we are remembered that without death there is no life. Only through death can life progress. It is important to remember that our individuation process and our collective responsibility have to be weighted and constantly evaluated. The Egyptian mythology has the goddess Maat. She represents the world order opposed to chaos. She is the carrier of the balance between the opposites. Therefore, she deserves to have a place in our reflection. And here you can admire this marvelous drawing of Maat, which was part of the drawing in the Egyptian tomb. Maat, as we can see, sits on one side of the balance or is represented by her symbol, the ostrich feather, her feather of truth. On the other side is put the heart of the dead. If the arm of her balance stands in equilibrium, it means that the dead is recognized by Maat as worthy of a new life. He is fit to enter in the world of beyond, otherwise he will disappear forever. Maat, in her symbolic feather, is the uncompromising judge. It is a harsh reminder that our life is a way we pave and prepare our symbolic afterlife or accomplishment. I dare say that our human journey toward a total individuation is quite narrow, not to say treacherous. Eros, sacrifice, and individuation are at work in our daily situation. Every small steps of our life is a test in the pursuit of our individuation process. Emma Jung, without doubt, realized and accomplished this delicate journey between two extremes, the pressure of her environment and the demand of herself. To prove the exceptional quality of Emma Jung, I wish to share with you some testimony which gives a precious insight to her realization. After her death, a member of the Psychology Club of Zurich remembered, and quote, "Frau Jung had given all of us women an example of how to love without being possessive and how to suffer without ending in bitterness. She was marvelously grand." After Emma's death, some friends reflect on those decades-long presence of Tony Wolff within the couple life, and they said, Jung was lucky to have had a very special woman who could handle such a trial. When Jung did put an end to the regular relationship with Tony, both Emma and Tony worked courageously together with an analyst to clarify their relationship. It allowed them to create a respectful friendship, enabling them to collaborate harmoniously within the Jungian Institute. We can admire this selfless attitude. At the end of her life, in an awesome gesture of disinterested love, Emma expressed her respect to Tony for what she had done for you, which she could not have done herself. Such a generosity leaves one speechless. And commenting on my newly released book, Love Sacrificed the Life of Emma Jung, a woman wrote, Emma is of equal force with Carl, but only in a far different way. Perhaps it's because she's a woman and has the magnificence of personality to match his. Her power is in Eros. As a conclusion, I invite my audience to have a look at the stele that Jung engraved in 1956, a few months after Emma's death. It took him some months before he could start the work. He admitted to have been deeply unsettled by this loss. For those who have had a chance to visit the Bollingen Tower, it is very moving to see this stele standing in the courtyard at the very spot where Jung put it after he was through with the carving. In 1956, Carl is grieving his wife and expresses what she represented for him and what kind of a woman she really was. On this limestone slab, we have the decor of a Greek temple. There are two pillars sustaining the roof, a lintel and its motto, a frontispiece with sculpture which are framing the inside text. The symbols of sun and moon are expression of the masculine and feminine archetype. Symbolically, Emma had integrated the masculine power of the sun and the feminine power of the moon. The triangular slated roof, like a spiritual elevation, encloses the sacred vessel. It is supposed to contain the blood and the host. It is a reference to the sacrificial ritual of the Mass, but it is also a reference to the Grail and its magic cauldron, which secret meaning occupied Emma's research during most of her adult life. In Jung's mind, it certainly was an attempt to convey in powerful and lasting images the way he personified Emma. He experienced her as a sacred container, a symbolic womb for him, her husband, for the children, and the many people who relied on her help. I like to imagine Jung as he chisels this beautiful limestone. Lost in his painful mourning, he has no other choice but to hail Emma as a blessed woman. It chisels that she deserved to enter the mystery of eternity. As he engraved the word, O singular vessel of devotion and obedience, he may reflect on Emma's genuine love and generosity. Could he feel some guilt or regret to have abused of her? Could he question his infidelity against her faithfulness? And we have here, right. Thank you, Ryan. On this picture, we see Jung in the company of Ruth Belle. It's important to remember that Ruth Belle, who accompanied Jung during his African trip, accepted as an older person to take care of him after Emma's death. Jung, seated as he is, seems really crushed by Emma's departures. He is aware of how much he depended on her. Like those two pillars that give strength to the temple, so was Emma for her husband and her family. And as Jung was lamenting the loss, he said, "She was the foundation of my house." As I was writing Emma Jung's life and her inner evolution, it struck me how actual and meaningful her message was. Reading between the lines, I could decipher what it had meant for her to face such a dramatic situation and how hard it had been before she could reach her own inner mandala. It had been a daunting experience. My humble conviction is that Jung would not have accomplished his impressive work if Emma had not been by his side through the lifelong tribulations. This is certainly the reason why Jung experiences such a terrible shock when Emma died. Then we can look again at the picture of the couple, of the young Emma and Carl in 1903 and Carl and Emma in their old ages. Yes. I like to return to those two pictures. It seems to me that they express the long path that the couple has traveled. Subjectively, it lifts somewhat the veil of the two persons who had started a journey together in 1903. In 1953, more or less knowingly, they are reaching the end of their common peregrination. The young married woman of 21 in 1903 looks more like an elegant bud, unsure of herself, but showing already a quiet and well-centered personality. On the other hand, Carl is 28 and is in possession of his medical degree in psychiatry. He is so proud of his conquest that he can hardly hide his fearless masculine power and his smile. In 1953, Emma had reached a state of extreme physical weakness due to the evolving cancer, but her face expresses a moving psychic serenity. She had accomplished a lonely journey through the complex path leading to her own conjunction of the opposites. The way she looks at Jung is full of affectionate tenderness and maybe some compassion. Carl shows signs of age. To me, he looks more sullen or reflexive than on other pictures. In a way, it is like entering with respect in their personal temple, revealing some aspect of the mystery of life. We can contemplate them. That's the end of my talk, and I thank you for your patience. If you have some question, maybe I'll be welcome to listen to them. Oh, that's a nice idea.
Talk about this picture at all before we get started with a couple of questions?
You know, I think it's a very nice idea to show again this beautiful picture of the Jung family. It even moves me when I see those pictures, even though I have seen it dozens of times, because it seems to me that at this period where there was already it was at the time of Schult, actually, it was the family is not complete because Helen, the very young last daughter, is not even on the picture because she's a year old. And when we look at this picture, we can see the female person standing on the right side, all dressed in white, very elegant, very charming. And then we have Carl standing up. He already is wearing his walking shoes with his son Franz, and so is Marianne sitting in the middle of the picture, who is also wearing her walking shoes. And I think we can also contemplate this picture because in a way, Carl and Emma, through those 53 years of marriage, really accomplished a beautiful life of a family, and this family now reached the 4th generation, and from the couple, the 5 children, they have already had 18 grandchildren, then I don't know how many great grands, and now we reach the 4th generation. So thank you, Ryan, for showing this picture again, which I think is a very beautiful picture. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I agree. I had one person ask about the statue of Eros, so let me clear that up real quick. The statue of Eros is in the Museo Capitolino. I believe that's the Capitol Museum in Italy. And it is a copy of a Greek statue by Lysippos in the 4th century BC. So I just wanted to let people know that that's the statue of Eros from earlier.
Yes, yes. You know, by the way, and I forgot one, because I had another picture, but that's okay. That will be for another webinar. Okay. Is there another question?
Yes, I do have one. I had someone ask about the letter to Sigmund Freud. Is there any other instances where Emma reached out to somebody else about her inner, troubles, or is that letter to Freud the only instance we have?
Well, it seems, from what she said, that only at the very beginning, when they were still living in the Burgosly, at that time, she had some, but in a way, you see, Emma was not a psychologically disturbed person, but still, because of the personality of Carl, because of the complexity of his personality and his needs and his urges, she wanted to see someone whose name is self. Actually, he was a psychiatrist from Germany who was in the Burgosly for some year getting some training with Jung. And she went to him. But afterwards, exactly the way she expresses it in the Freud letter, she was very much on her own. And she could not rely on any analyst from the Jung environment because everybody knew her. She was a central, person in this galaxy somehow. And I think she really had to find her own self by herself. And Jung could not really help her at all. That's my strong opinion. That's why I think Emma Jung is such a remarkable personality, and she did really pioneer something for her own self. Is that clear?
Oh yes, and
That's
that
why
letter was.
yes, I have a strong admiration for this woman because very few, and it's being said in few books who were written around Jung, who sometimes mention Emma, but because she always remained in the background somehow, they didn't realize how hard for her it was because she kept that very secret to herself, you know. Her children spoke about that. Her son, Franz, was very much aware of her suffering during the time of the relationship between Carl and Tony. And he even said that they hated to see Tony come to the family lunch on Sunday, and they were supposed to call him Auntie. And he said that for his mother, he felt that it was a terrible suffering. So things like that are so clear that she was lonesome and that she was on her own. In a way, that's why, you know, Ryan, that's why Penelope, for me, is a very good illustration of Emma, because Penelope, Odysseus' wife, was alone while she was making her expedition, and she was in her palace, so to speak, and everybody around her was trying to seduce her or to create troubles for her. And she was standing all by herself. And I think that's why in my book, for those who have read it or will read it, they will discover how I make reference to Penelope. And it seems to me that it really makes sense. That's why, to me, in a way, Emma Jung could almost deserve a mythologic representation and an archetypal representation. She might be one day. Is there another question, Ryan?
Well, it looks like we don't have too many questions. I think that your details in your seminar were so good that people already have them all answered, most likely. Do you have anything that you'd like to close with before we shut down for the day?
You know, in a way, there was something I would have been interested to develop, is the fact that, in a way, Emma Jung today, and I think it would deserve another webinar, I think that the position of Emma Jung as a woman at her time already, at her time, she was in a way revolutionary. And my idea is maybe to develop further on a comparison between what the archetype of the woman was in the time of Emma and how about the archetype of the woman today, where we see so many women fighting all over the world. And I have in mind Asia, Africa, where the women are really going to the front to defend the right, to ask for respectability, to deserve equality, and they are suffering, and some are dying for that. And I think it is very impressive. And I think that Emma Jung, in her own way, did pioneer a feminine role. You know, I think so.
Oh yes, and you're right about women defending in the front lines. I believe that there's a entire brigade of women on the front line against ISIS right now. I believe it's Yazidi troops, but a whole brigade of commando women. So yes, the archetype has changed.
Yes.
And for the better, in my opinion.
Yes. Right.
Well, thank you so much for coming with us today, Imelda. We're very excited about your third webinar. It's not on the books yet, folks, but it's going to be later in the fall of 2015. So just be on the lookout. We'll let you know when that's ready. Other than that, we'll get this recording ready, hopefully by Tuesday. And we're also going to put the transcription out there as well. So Imelda, thank you so much for joining us.
And I've been very happy to be sharing my experience with my invisible audience.
Absolutely.
And I thank them for being there.
Yes, thank you everybody for joining us. Imelda, thank you. And we will see you again in the fall. Until then, the electronic ebook is going to be ready for Love and Sacrifice on Tuesday. So be on the lookout for that. You can put it on your Kindle or any other device for that matter. So thank you, Imelda. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Okay. Bye-bye, Ryan, and thank you for your help.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.